There's a quiet moment most people miss. It happens when someone hears a compliment and instead of smiling, they pause. Not because it was awkward, not because it was too much, but because it landed somewhere deeper than expected. Men who stay silent notice this moment more than others because they've seen what happens when words aren't trying to perform. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't like admitting. Not all compliments feel the same, and the difference has nothing to do with charm, looks, or delivery. It has to do with where the words come from. Most men believe compliments are supposed to do something, create interest, trigger attraction, get a reaction. That belief alone strips the compliment of its weight. Because the moment words are used as currency, they stop feeling honest. Women don't just hear compliments, they feel the intention underneath them. And intention is impossible to hide. That's why compliments from older men feel different. Not louder, not smoother, not more impressive, heavier. Because when a man has lived long enough, his words stop reaching forward. They settle. They don't sound like flattery, they sound like recognition. And recognition does something most people underestimate. It relaxes the nervous system. People who never explain themselves understand this instinctively. They've learned that calm carries more authority than effort ever could. Before we go any further, lock this in. This isn't about age, it's about internal posture. Older men don't succeed with compliments because they're older. They succeed because they're no longer bargaining. And women sense that immediately. Here's where most men get confused. They think attraction comes from intensity, from emotional spikes, from saying the right thing at the right time. But attraction rarely grows in chaos. It grows in safety. And safety isn't created by words that reach outward. It's created by words that come from stillness. That's why the first compliment women deeply appreciate from an older man isn't flashy. It's this: I appreciate how comfortable you are with yourself. This doesn't inflate her ego. It doesn't put her on display. It does something quieter. It removes pressure. Most women spend years being observed, evaluated, compared by society, by men, and often by themselves. When a man notices that she's at ease with who she is, something inside her exhales because she realizes she's not being measured. She's being seen. Men who notice patterns instead of reacting emotionally understand why this works. This compliment doesn't ask her to be more. It tells her she's already enough in this moment. And acceptance is the fastest way to create trust. But here's the part most people miss. That trust isn't emotional dependency. It's emotional permission. Permission to stop performing. Which brings us to the second compliment women love hearing from older men. You have a calm presence. It's refreshing. Calm is rare in a world addicted to urgency, stimulation, and emotional noise. Calm feels unfamiliar, almost suspicious, but calm also feels safe. When a man recognizes a woman's calm presence, he's not feeding off her energy. He's responding to her being. That tells her something without saying it directly. You don't need to entertain me. You don't need to escalate. You don't need to manage my emotions. Men who stay grounded don't chase intensity. They've learned that chaos creates connection quickly and destroys it just as fast. Calm creates something slower and far more durable. At this point, something subtle starts shifting in her perception. She's no longer wondering what she needs to give. She's noticing how she feels. That's the real pivot, because attraction doesn't grow where effort increases. It grows where effort disappears, which leads directly into the third compliment women value deeply. I enjoy the way you think. This lands differently, not because it's intellectual, but because it signals attention without agenda. It tells her, you're not waiting for your turn to speak. You're not scanning for openings. You're not extracting moments. You're present. Older men deliver this naturally because they're no longer auditioning. They're curious. And being seen intellectually is more intimate than being admired physically because it reaches identity. People who've been misunderstood for years feel this immediately. They recognize the difference between being admired and being understood. And once that difference is felt, it's impossible to forget. Here's the tension most people don't resolve yet. None of these compliments are about appearance. That's not an accident. It's a signal. Women don't want to be evaluated. They want to be recognized. And recognition doesn't rush. It observes. We're only just beginning to touch the surface of why these compliments work. Because the deeper reason has less to do with words and everything to do with emotional control. And that's where the next shift happens. But we'll get there shortly. Some men try to learn these compliments as lines. That's the fastest way to drain them of meaning because women aren't responding to the sentence. They're responding to the state of the man saying it. And once you understand that difference, you stop trying to say the right thing. You start noticing the right things, and that changes how every word lands. Here's where most men lose the thread. They hear compliments like these and think the power is in what is being said. It isn't. The power is in what isn't happening internally. When the words are spoken, men who stay silent long enough eventually notice this. The most effective compliments don't create movement. They create stillness. And stillness is uncomfortable for people who rely on reaction to feel relevant. That's why the fourth compliment women love hearing from older men sounds almost too simple. You don't try too hard, and that's attractive. This one lands quietly, but it lands deep because many women live under a constant, unspoken pressure to perform, to be engaging, to be interesting, to justify their presence. When a man notices effortlessness, he's doing something rare. He's removing the scoreboard. He's saying, without saying it, there's nothing you need to prove here. Men who notice patterns instead of chasing validation understand why this matters. Attraction doesn't grow where someone feels watched. It grows where someone feels unburdened. And effortlessness signals emotional safety. At this point, something subtle shifts again. She's no longer tracking how she's coming across. She's present, and presence is where real connection begins. Now, pay attention to what hasn't happened yet. There's still no praise, no inflation, no pedestal. That restraint is doing more work than enthusiasm ever could. Which brings us to the fifth compliment, one that carries real psychological weight. You have depth. Not everyone does. Depth isn't a surface observation. It's a recognition earned over time. When an older man says this, it doesn't feel casual because he's learned the difference between complexity and chaos, between intensity and substance. This compliment makes a woman feel chosen, not idealized. Chosen for who she is beneath the surface, not for who she appears to be in the moment. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Men who have lived long enough know this. Being idealized creates pressure. Being understood creates loyalty. Depth suggests emotional layers, experience, inner substance. It tells her you're not chasing novelty. You're recognizing value. And recognition hits differently than admiration. Now here's where perspective begins to shift for many viewers. Up to this point, these compliments may sound respectful, even kind, but that's not why they work. They work because none of them ask for anything. No response required, no validation expected, no outcome attached. That absence of demand is what creates attraction. which leads us into the sixth compliment women love hearing from older men. I respect the way you handle yourself. Respect is more powerful than praise. Praise elevates. Respect equalizes. This compliment places her on solid ground. It communicates maturity without dominance, interest without intrusion. Men who never explain themselves understand this instinctively. Respect tells her, I see your autonomy. I'm not here to manage you. I'm not here to impress you. That creates emotional safety at a level most people can't articulate but feel immediately. And here's the part that often surprises people. Respect builds attraction slowly and then all at once because it doesn't stimulate. It stabilizes. Now notice the pattern forming. Each compliment removes pressure instead of adding value. That's not accidental. Older men aren't adding something to her. They're removing friction. Which brings us to the seventh compliment, one that often goes unnoticed until it's felt. You don't need to prove anything, and that shows confidence. This lands like relief. Many women feel the need to justify their choices, their boundaries, their pace. When a man recognizes quiet confidence, he's signaling something important. I'm not evaluating your worth. I trust your self-trust. Confidence that doesn't seek validation is rare, and rare things feel valuable without trying. Men who stay calm under pressure recognize this form of confidence immediately because they've learned that the loudest confidence is often compensating, and the quiet kind doesn't need witnesses. At this point, something internal settles. She's no longer wondering where she stands. She feels steady, and steadiness is addictive in a world built on instability. Now, we arrive at the eighth compliment, the one that often matters most. I enjoy being around you. It feels easy. This isn't romantic on the surface. That's why it works. Ease means no performance, no tension, no emotional labor. It tells her she doesn't drain you. She doesn't complicate your life. She adds comfort. And comfort is what makes people stay. Here's the psychological twist most men never consider. People don't bond over excitement. They bond over relief. Relief from effort. Relief from explanation. Relief from pressure. Older men succeed here because they're not chasing chemistry. They're noticing compatibility. And compatibility doesn't spike, it settles. But there's still one mistake many men make with compliments. We'll confront that next because once you see it, you stop using words to get something and start using them to reveal something. That's where real power lives. Here's the mistake that quietly ruins most compliments before they ever land. They ask for something. Approval, interest, validation, a reaction. The moment a compliment reaches forward, it collapses inward. Men who stay silent long enough eventually see this pattern clearly. Words don't fail because they're poorly chosen. They fail because they're motivated. Women are extremely sensitive to this. Not consciously, but neurologically. They don't just hear what is said. They register where it's coming from. A compliment delivered from need feels light. A compliment delivered from calm feels grounded. And grounded words carry weight. This is where older men separate themselves without trying. They're not bargaining. They're not positioning. They're not fishing. They're observing. And observation is rare in a culture addicted to reaction. People who never explain themselves understand this intuitively. They've learned that the strongest position is the one that doesn't require defense. Now, let's slow this down because this is the part most viewers feel but can't quite articulate yet. When a compliment comes from need, it creates subtle tension, even if the words are polite, even if the tone is smooth. Why? Because the nervous system senses expectation. Something is being asked for. And expectation creates pressure. When a compliment comes from calm awareness, the opposite happens. Pressure disappears. There's no urgency, no pull, no emotional grab, just recognition. And recognition feels grounding because it doesn't demand movement. This is why older men don't rush compliments. They don't stack them. They don't escalate them. They let them sit because they're not trying to build momentum. They're letting meaning settle. Here's the uncomfortable realization many men resist at first. The most attractive compliments aren't designed to create attraction. They reveal presence. And presence is what most people are starving for. Now notice something subtle about everything we've covered so far. None of these compliments change her state. They meet her where she already is. That's not accidental. Men who notice patterns instead of reacting emotionally understand this rule. Trying to shift someone's emotional state creates resistance. Recognizing someone's emotional state creates connection. That's why these compliments don't spike excitement. They create clarity. And clarity feels powerful because it removes confusion. At this stage, many viewers start re-evaluating their own behavior. They realize they weren't wrong. They were incomplete. They were operating without the full picture. They thought attraction was something to be generated. In reality, it's something that's allowed. Allowed when pressure is removed. Allowed when intention is clean. Allowed when words aren't transactional. Older men don't attract by impressing. They attract by perceiving. And perception feels intimate because it requires attention without agenda. Here's a question worth sitting with, not answering. Just when you give a compliment, is it an observation or is it an attempt? That distinction changes everything. People who never chase reactions know this truth quietly. The less you need the moment to go a certain way, the more powerful your presence becomes. This is why women often describe these compliments as hitting different. Not because they're clever, but because they feel clean. No residue, no expectation, no emotional strings attached. And that cleanliness creates trust. Trust creates ease. Ease creates attraction. Not the explosive kind, the sustainable kind. Now here's where the final shift begins, and it's subtle but irreversible once you see it. Older men don't give compliments to move closer. They give them because they're already centered. And centered people don't reach. They notice. There's a quiet upgrade that happens once this clicks. Not externally, internally. And it changes how you move without you trying to change anything at all. Most men think maturity shows up in what you do differently. In reality, it shows up in what you stop doing. You stop trying to steer moments. You stop trying to be remembered. You stop trying to land somewhere specific. And the moment that effort disappears, something else becomes visible. Your presence. Men who stay silent know this phase well. It's when you realize you no longer need to announce yourself to be felt. That's the hidden reason these compliments work. They aren't strategies, they're symptoms. Symptoms of a man who is no longer negotiating his worth through interaction. Older men don't wake up one day and decide to speak differently. They wake up and realize they don't need to position themselves anymore. So, their words stop reaching. They settle. That's why women feel something different when they hear them. Not excitement, recognition. And recognition creates a strange psychological effect. Most people don't expect it makes someone feel real. In a world where everyone is performing, being real feels rare. That's the deeper layer beneath every compliment we covered. I appreciate how comfortable you are with yourself. I enjoy the way you think. I respect how you handle yourself. It feels easy being around you. None of these try to define her. They confirm her. And confirmation calms the nervous system because it removes uncertainty. People who notice patterns instead of reacting emotionally understand this. Well, uncertainty is exhausting. Clarity is attractive. Here's the perspective shift most viewers don't realize they're having right now. You don't need better lines. You don't need sharper delivery. You don't need more confidence tricks. You need less internal noise, because compliments don't fail due to lack of charm. They fail due to lack of grounding. The moment you stop using words to create outcomes, your words start creating trust. And trust doesn't announce itself, it settles in quietly. This is why women often can't explain why these compliments feel different. They just know they do. Because the man isn't trying to enter her world. He's stable in his own. And stability is magnetic in a culture built on instability. Here's the identity shift that locks this in. Men who don't need reactions speak differently. Men who don't explain themselves are heard differently. Men who observe before they speak are felt differently. Once you understand this, something subtle but permanent changes. You stop complimenting to connect. You connect and compliments appear naturally. You stop trying to be impressive and suddenly your calm becomes noticeable. You stop chasing chemistry and ease begins doing the work for you. This isn't about age. It's about emotional economy. You're no longer spending energy to get something back. And when energy isn't spent, it's felt. That's why older men don't attract by impressing. They attract by perceiving. And once you perceive without need, your words don't try to move the moment. They anchor it. From that point on, you don't speak to be remembered. You speak from a place that doesn't need memory to feel complete. And people feel that immediately, quietly, clearly, without confusion.